Connecting wires, either AC 12 volt or especially stranded wires. I just repaired a guy's ignition in his motorhome with these things. They're absolutely the slickest things I've ever found. So I'll pass that around for everybody to look at it. Have it. And
Just
then,
ordered stuff from Amazon.
what's that?
I just ordered stuff from Amazon.
Yeah, I ordered boxes of them on Amazon. It's like 50 of them in a box for $14. They come in 2-hole, 3-hole, and 5-hole. And I think they've got an 8-hole. So anytime I connect anything under the dash anymore, I use those so I can plug more wires in later if you want to. And then I'll have this thing running if anybody wants to look at it later. How many people are familiar with Raspberry Pis? This is a Pi top. There's a Raspberry Pi that plugs into it. And it turns your Raspberry Pi into a really, really nice notebook computer with a full HD display, touch pad, and a breadboarding thing you can take out in the woods and play with. The battery runs it for about 12 hours. So if anybody wants to look at this later, I just fell in love with it. They're kind of expensive. They're typically about $300, but every once in a while you can find a Micro Center, they'll have a stack of them for $200. So if you're into Raspberry Pis, this is really a cool way to play with them. Thanks.
All right, well, it's almost finished. I'm having trouble with the Velcro strap here. All right, there we go. So I recently finished building a K3S. Absolutely love the thing, and I still plan on taking it out to parks all over the place because, well, I got bags and pelican cases and all kinds of things to protect it. So, and I also picked up my first tuned loop antenna. I have a receiving loop antenna back at the house. This one is the, what's the name of that company?
Chameleon?
Chameleon, it is, yes. Chameleon F-Loop 2.0. Brilliant antenna. I love this thing. So, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody has. There's a battery there if you guys want to play with it, and just come on by. Okay, thank you.
That's a tuning, is that a passive tuning thing on the, tuning apparatus on the bottom?
Yeah, there's a,
What's the frequency range, tuning range?
this one is 80 through 10. If you put on the second piece of coax, so it's a double loop, it's 80 meters. All the way up to 10 meters, there's a 6-to-1 reduction drive on the variable capacitor, so it makes it much easier to tune. And there is also a high efficiency loop made of 1-inch aluminum. In that case, it'll go down as low as 40 meters, I believe.
Cool.
Very nice, very nice. And it's surprisingly easy to tune. So, really not bad. Next.
Cool. Yeah, I brought a power supply and amplifier. This is a W6PQL solid state 1296 megahertz amplifier. Puts out 700 watts. 10 watts in and 700 out. So I just finished building it today.
Cool. Do you use that to microwave your dinner?
No.
Okay.
And your use for it is?
Well, you can do contacts on 1296. You can do tropo. You can do moon bounce with that.
Or just heat the moon up.
But it runs off 50 volts at about 25 amps.
I'm sorry, what's the output power?
700.
That should be enough.
I can see my echoes.
And what are you driving it with a transceiver then?
I either use my ICOM 9100 or a DEMI 1296-28 HP5 transverter that I've got some pads on to pad it down to 10 watts.
Transferred down from 2 meters?
It's
Or
10 meters.
10 meters? Yeah.
28.1 equals 1296.1.
Okay. Cool.
What kind of antenna?
Well, I've got a couple of 70 element Yagis. So I can run either the two 70 element Yagis, I can run 140 elements with 700 watts, or I can use the 18 meter dish out in Kiowa County.
Okay, so we were talking about 80 meters a few minutes ago, right? Wavelengths like a bazillion. 1296 is what, 23 centimeters?
23, right.
So your half wave on your Yagi's about that wide, right?
It's about 9 inches long, the wavelength.
Yeah, but a half wave, the Yagi elements are like 4.5 inches.
Right, right.
Yeah, yep.
You thinking about giving up QRP?
Well, I've still got my KX3 and I like it a lot. But I run a GS35 on 2 meters sometimes, the Russian triode. And it can put out 1,500 watts on 2 meters.
I guess me. Okay, there are two kinds of people in the world. There are bad guys and not bad guys. And when I say guys, I mean all genders, whichever of the 4 genders you might be. So who's a bad guy? We got bad guys around here.
Oh, yes.
People that like bags. Yeah, Barry's a bad guy. So I've had this bag for a while and bought it on Amazon or whatever, and I filled it up and I said, I need another bag. Now it happens to be a backpack, one for the front, but I don't really use it as a backpack so much as it's just another bag, and sometimes it's nice to be able to sling it over your shoulder. And so I got another one, and I decided, hey, I'll get the coyote color because it doesn't show dirt quite as well. And when it showed up, it had this American flag on it, okay, which is all set up with Velcro. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And I've always had this thing about patches, but I always had this problem of I rarely loved a patch enough to like stick it on my shirt forever or stick it on my bag forever. But I thought, hey, this Velcro thing's pretty cool.
Except for these.
Except for those. And of course, this really comes out of the military system, right? A lot of you guys are probably familiar with the Molly attachments and all that, and a lot of it has Velcro on it. And so, okay, I got that, and then, started looking on Amazon, got my Colorado flag, and then I discovered you can get custom labels made pretty easily, so it's like, my name and call sign on my bag, that looks handy. And then this one says radio gear, in case I forget what's inside the bag. Joyce tries to throw it away or something, and she knows it's radio gear, so that might affect her decision. This one says 6 meter, 2 meter, single sideband, so okay, that goes on that one because that's where those radios usually are. This says VHF soda, and then I got a soda patch. It didn't come with the Velcro thing on it, but since I'm married to a seamstress, she fixed that quite quickly. And then I started discovering there's all kinds of other little pouches and stuff, right? Most of them have the Velcro, and they've also got the Molly system on the back too, so you can, do stuff like, here's your little 2 meter, 70 centimeter FM accessories, and you could go ahead and attach that onto the back of this if you wanted. I haven't used that a lot, but mostly it's the thing that Steve taught me. When you're doing soda stuff, you gotta have flair. This is all about flair on your bag. So,
Also called swag.
or swag. And you can get these, there's a bunch of vendors on Amazon that make something like this for you, custom for $7. They do it in China or Singapore or someplace, and it shows up in the mail. And they seem to be pretty good at handling specialized characters. So I was worried that the K0, the 0 wouldn't be slashed, but I put the special slash symbol in there, and they did it just fine. So they're pretty good with that. So that's it. So
Can you
where
get
do
all your
bags?
radios in them 2 bags?
No, I'm probably gonna need more bags, that's what I think.
Or bigger bags.
Yeah.
So who's your suppliers?
Big bags.
Is that Mr. Rich?
Mostly go to Amazon. And I don't have a favorite one, there's a ton of them that have bags. In fact, the bags are really affordable, like this. This in an outdoor shop is probably like an $80 backpack, and on Amazon it's like 35. So it's pretty, and it's got nice zippers, and it's pretty good. It's probably not,
bags do you have, Bob?
it's probably not mil spec, I mean, I don't wanna claim that, but it's pretty good quality.
Home Depot has some little pouches. And they're really like.
Home Depot has them?
Yeah, and they got a zipper on them and a little see-through and everything else. They run about $5 for 5 of them or something like that, different sizes.
Yeah.
And I've got 40 of them.
Cause you're a bag guy.
I'm a bag.
And how about your, like, name tape and call sign, those type of things?
Like, what?
Amazon also?
Yeah, Amazon. I can send out the particular vendor I've used to, on the email list if you guys are interested. Cause I've had pretty good luck with them.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay.
So, I'm sure you've heard of these RTL SDRs. In fact, I think one of the guys won Connect Time by sweeping the system, the spectrum with, one of these. Basically, they were TV tuners, and they figured out you could tune any frequency you want and get, 8-bit IQ, sampled it up to whatever USB. Usually it's like 2.8 megasamples per second. And because you've got IQ, that's the full bandwidth of it. So then somebody else figured out that you can play with this ADSB. It's airplane automatic location. So they're just sending out their position all the time. And I've just had a blast playing with that fairly recently. First, I built a cantenna. I lost the element and moved back from Iowa here. But this thing worked unreasonably well. The only thing this is a green bean can, and I cut down to 1090 megahertz quarter wave. Stuck it into an SMA connector. There's a filter in here, but you really don't need the filter from what I've seen. There's no local interference. And you can track all these airplanes. There's free open source programs running out there. So I decided to have a little more fun with it. I found a surplus ADS antenna. This is kind of like my truth model. And then I keep playing with these different antennas. And so the latest one that I've got here is just another quarter wave going into a pizza pie can. So we're looking at RTL SDR is like $30 shipped for this one that's got an LNA in there and a filter tuned for this band. The can and the pizza pie came to like $1, right? And then just run it into the Raspberry Pi that we've already been talking about, and I'm actually serving this up and tracking like hundreds of airplanes live in real time all the time. If you're interested, check out my call sign KA6ASW.ddns.net, and it's :88. I'm running on a non-standard port, so it's been fun. And
Could you repeat that website?
yeah, sure, it's KI6ASW.ddns.net, and then you'll have to put a :8080. I was going to show you live on this, but the connectivity wasn't working for me.
So what frequency does that operate on?
1090, 1090. So there's another, I think, Mode S, which is down in like 900 megahertz or so.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next.
Okay.
Yes, it's you.
Unfortunately, I couldn't get hooked up to the Wi-Fi here. I haven't quite figured all my things out yet. But as Bob brought in hotspots that talked about last year, and OLD's got the single hotspot. This is a duplex and actually works as a repeater. So you set up repeater frequencies, and I monitored both time slots off of this. So, and then we put a little screen on it so that with both time slots and the repeater frequency, I can monitor several talk groups at once. instead of being stuck with the one, working on it. And I can talk, since it works just like a repeater, I can talk on one while the other one's sending to another radio. So it's dynamic like the repeater.
What's the hardware again?
Do what?
What's the hardware again?
It's a Raspberry Pi hardware.
No, I mean the
But,
RF hardware.
but the duplex card comes out of China. And we ordered these, the guys up north in northern Colorado ordered these from DJ7 something. He's on Facebook. You can look him up. And he sends these out. They're about $100, $120 for the duplex card. And it just goes right on a Raspberry Pi 3.
Yeah.
Plugs right in and everything works now. We had to put a fan on these because they run a little warmer because it's doing about 3 times as much as the Simplex hotspot. So it's got a fan on it, it's got a screen, and for those that are close,
Cool.
and of course, you can edit the Nextion screen. There are multiple versions of it. There's a new version now, and I haven't edited to that whenever somebody talks, the talk group comes up, it shows the flag of the country they're coming from up on the side. But it also shows the last talk group and the last speaker on that time slot. So you have the current speaker and then you have the last one on the time slot. And then there's a couple of guys that are working on additional screens to show the last 10 talkers on that time slot. So it's getting carried away. The more you follow it, the more they are doing. I've got a German board coming someday. They're making the same duplex, but it's an improved version. So hopefully I get to play with that within a month or so.
So it's just DMR only?
Yes, no.
To do
This is,
D-Star?
it says it's on a Pi, it does DMR, it does D-Star, it does YSF. It also does the conversions, YSF to DMR. It does the YSF to D-Star. You can route it through DMR back to D-Star if you plug into the right talk groups. So it has all the options since it's in a Pi. With Pi Star as the software, you can make it do just about anything you want.
And does on the RF side, is it 70 centimeters, 2 meters?
Well, this one, it will work on VHF, but it's 70 centimeter is the way it was built. But it will work in the 2 meter band. It's not its primary frequency.
Okay, you said it works like a repeater. I have a little trouble thinking about
This one is a repeater. It's set on 442.600, 447.600.
But when it transmits on one side, it's gonna desense the other one,
Yeah, it
right?
will desense a little, but you're only running 10 milliwatts, so.
Okay.
So it's not that bad. And I've got a pair of duplexers hanging on the shelf, the old mobile UHF duplexers. When I get a chance to play, I'm gonna put the duplexer in, single antenna, extra screens in a little project box.
I guess the other issue is you're probably not that far away from the hotspot either, right? So a little bit of desense isn't hurt you.
Although I have accessed this from about a block away, about 100 yards. And I can hear it well over 100 yards from my house, driving down the street. It's still working well over 100 yards. So,
Cool.
and then you get the little higher power. I've heard Al's open spot on occasion coming in. We live about 4 blocks away, 5 blocks.
You want a little zoom spot?
But the open spot runs about 20 milliwatts, so it's twice as much power. Right. That's one of my new toys.
Thank you. All right, well, nobody knows what this is. I mean,
Never seen one before.
since we have a water moratorium, I use this to find water in Monument. But the reason I got this was there's a club out of New Jersey that was making these. And it's only 20 watts. It goes from 7 to 14.350 megahertz. And it tears apart, folds down, fits in a backpack. And then yesterday I was mentioning to Steve, I'm on the patio, it's raining, I thought, okay, put the KX2 on, and I hit a guy in Camino Island, Washington, about 1,300 miles away at 10 watts. So they're fantastic, as you know. So I highly recommend it. It's a compromised antenna, but to throw in your backpack, works well. And I've used it in hotels, legally, not illegally. So that's about it.
You can keep the camera going this way, so yeah. I apologize for my voice. My voice went south. I don't know where it went. So there's a lot of nice toys here, you know, the high-tech stuff. I decided to go low-tech. I'm not sure if anybody has anything like this. I have hundreds of them. If you take 2 of these and put them in a dark drawer, next time you open the drawer, you'll have 10 of them. So anyway, I've been on a mission for years and years, didn't realize I was on a mission. How to keep these things kind of neat and tidy, not tangled up, things of that nature. I've tied knots in them. I've wrapped them up. Rubber bands rot. So I've been trying all kinds of different ways to finally figure it out. The girls have been holding out on us. Hair ties. Those little rubber bands they put in your hair for ponytails and stuff. Great, they're just the right size. They don't rot. They're very handy. They're very small, cheap. You can get different sizes. You can get bigger ones for if you're having a bigger cables and stuff. Work fantastic. And for bigger cables like the coax and stuff, I use bongo ties. I get these from HRO. And these will rot after a period of time. But the other ones they're just great. So anyway, finally figured out, completed my mission. So I'll pass it along to you. That's it.
And you can put them in your ponytail.
Project up at the Parker Radio Association. It's a way to shoot your antennas up in the trees. It's pretty slick if anybody wants to come see it.
What kind of pressure?
Well, I find that if I pump it up, I use a bicycle pump, and at about 60 PSI, it'll shoot 60 feet in the air, and it's about a foot of PSI, a foot of elevation for each pound you put in. So I've shot it 75, 80 feet, no problem. And it's just a handheld switch. I was talking to Steve, he said that he built one with a solenoid in it, so you can electronically trip it, and it'll open all the way, but I haven't had any problem. When you turn it, it just goes kerthunk, and that thing just flies.
I like the potato versions.
So anyway, I have the plans for these, if anybody wants them, just let me know. And then in honor of the presentation last week, where we were talking about frequency domain and time domain, I brought in a project that I had built last year. It's a little transmitter called the Michigan Mighty Mite. It's a crystal control transmitter using a color burst crystal at about 3.7 megahertz. And when I built it, I put it on an oscilloscope, which I, of course, knew how to pronounce and probably not even how to spell. And I had a real ugly pattern. So, just can't get much uglier than that. And so what I did was I switched the scope and ran the Fourier transformation to see what kind of harmonics I was putting out. And so this is the time domain versus frequency domain we were talking about last time. So what I did was, here's another version of it with my cheap little Chinese oscilloscope. The nice sinusoidal shape is right by the crystal. The top one that's green is the output at the antenna, and then the bottom line is shows you all the harmonics in the frequency domain. So what we did was I built a low-pass filter and then modeled it in LT spikes. So it was kind of like a Chebyshev filter with a couple of capacitors that bypass the inductors. And it modeled out pretty well. And when I ran the Fourier transformation again, you could see that it dropped the harmonics way down. So it's not quite, I can't say that it's perfectly legal to use this without a dummy load, because it only goes down 37 dB and we're limited to 43 dB for spurious emissions. But it just seemed like a practical explanation of what Mike and Chip were talking about last week.
Why is it so noisy?
Pardon?
Why is your little radio so noisy?
Well, you know, it's, look at how it was built.
I see that.
By the way, this technique I used is called Manhattan style for you guys that are builders, if anybody wants to come look at it. You take these squares and you glue them on a solid copper ground plane, and then you can just go, you can solder right to the ground plane when you need to, and then you just jump from pad to pad. You can buy these pads, there's a guy on the line. So. That's it. Thank you. Project up at the Parker Radio Association. It's a way to shoot your antennas up in the trees. It's pretty slick if anybody wants to come see it.
What kind of pressure?
Well, I find that if I pump it up, I use a bicycle pump, and at about 60 PSI, it'll shoot 60 feet in the air, and it's about a foot of PSI, a foot of elevation for each pound you put in. So I've shot it 75, 80 feet, no problem. And it's just a handheld switch. I was talking to Steve, he said that he built one with a solenoid in it, so you can electronically trip it, and it'll open all the way, but I haven't had any problem. When you turn it, it just goes kerthunk, and that thing just flies.
I like the potato versions.
So anyway, I have the plans for these, if anybody wants them, just let me know. And then in honor of the presentation last week, where we were talking about frequency domain and time domain, I brought in a project that I had built last year. It's a little transmitter called the Michigan Mighty Mite. It's a crystal control transmitter using a color burst crystal at about 3.7 megahertz. And when I built it, I put it on an oscilloscope, which I of course knew how to pronounce and probably not even how to spell. And I had a real ugly pattern. So, just can't get much uglier than that. And so what I did was I switched the scope and ran the Fourier transformation to see what kind of harmonics I was putting out. And so this is the time domain versus frequency domain we were talking about last time. So what I did was, here's another version of it with my cheap little Chinese oscilloscope. The nice sinusoidal shape is right by the crystal. The top one that's green is the output at the antenna, and then the bottom line is the shows you all the harmonics in the frequency domain. So what we did was I built a low-pass filter and then modeled it in LT Spice. So it was kind of like a Chebyshev filter with a couple of capacitors that bypass the inductors. And it modeled out pretty well, and when I ran the Fourier transformation again, you can see that it dropped the harmonics way down. So it's not quite, I can't say that it's perfectly legal to use this without a dummy load, because it only goes down 37 dB and we're limited to 43 dB for spurious emissions. But it just seemed like a practical explanation of what Mike and Chip were talking about last week.
Why is it so noisy?
Pardon?
Why is your little radio so noisy?
Well, you know, it's, look at how it was built.
I see that.
By the way, this technique I used is called Manhattan style for you guys that are builders, if anybody wants to come look at it. You take these squares and you glue them on a solid copper ground plane, and then you can just go, you can solder right to the ground plane when you need to, and then you just jump from pad to pad. You can buy these pads, there's a guy on the line. So. That's it. Thank you.
Zero I. I got two kits that I built.
A weak signal, 1 meter frequency on
I've got two kits here that I built recently. Robert Ray had this one on, I think it was on his Raspberry Pi, but it's a dummy load from QRP guys.
Just use a wet finger.
Pretty small. And it's very easy to build. Just basically 4 fairly high wattage resistors, and the connector, and a capacitor, a diode, and a little header thing that you can also use it as a power meter for low power levels. So you pass that around. The other kit that I got is also from QRPguys.com. And this is a keyer and code trainer combination on here. I've only tried the keyer part so far, I mean the code trainer part so far, but it has the option of generating random groups of, I believe it was 5 characters at whatever speed you want to generate them at, just for code practice. And you hook it up to headphones, or if you have a little amplifier with speaker, you can use that too on there. The keyer I haven't tried yet, but basically it just generates a tone for practice of transmitting on there. And you can adjust the speed up and down, turn it on and off, the volume, and that's basically it on there. QRPguys.com. They have a lot of kits, if you haven't looked at that site before.